Iran blocked its own airspace just as Trump canceled his weekend trip, skipped his own son's wedding, and returned to the White House in the midst of the most explosive moment of the crisis. This Saturday, May 23, 2026, Tehran restricted flights in the western part of Iranian airspace, a sensitive area in any scenario of an attack coming from the direction of Israel, Iraq, or American bases in the Middle East. While Washington discussed new options against the regime, Trump did not treat this as a routine matter. He gave up his weekend away, said he would stay in Washington for government matters, and left the political message hanging. If Iran is so secure, then why did it empty its own skies? If Trump isn't preparing a serious response, then why did he even drop family commitments to stay at the White House? And how does Tehran intend to intimidate the United States? When the regime itself is already acting like it's expecting the next blow, I'll tell you all about it in a moment, but right now, you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Real-time information with the best journalistic quality you've ever seen, the Milson Alves standard of credibility. Trump not only changed his schedule, he canceled a weekend that was planned outside of Washington, including attending the wedding of Donald Trump Jr. with Bettina Anderson in the Bahamas. Reuters reported that the president cited urgent government obligations to remain in the American capital, while other sources indicated that the decision came amid negotiations about Iran and Israel. In practice, the political optics are powerful. While Tehran closes its airspace, Trump withdraws to the White House command center and makes it clear that the issue has moved to the top of the presidential agenda. The Iranian airspace closure mainly affects the western part of the airspace, precisely the most sensitive area in case of an attack, coming from the direction of Israel, Iraq, or American bases in the Middle East, with restrictions at airports such as Tabriz, Kermanshah, Avas, Shiraz, and Yazd, Kerman, Kish, and Abadan. In simple terms, Iran shut down the part of its airspace where it most fears a threat could enter. This is not a normal measure for civil aviation. It's a decision driven by heightened alert, defense, and calculated fear. This move comes after weeks of war, threats, and stalled negotiations. The United States is pushing to prevent Iran from maintaining nuclear capability and to reopen the Strait of Hormuz without blackmail, fees, or Iranian control over an international passage. When a nation restricts civilian flights, reduces movement within its own territory, and puts its defense on alert, it is telling the world that it is already preparing for the possibility of an attack, retaliation, or missile launches. That's what makes this significant. If the Iranian regime were comfortable, it wouldn't need to clear the skies. The White House has also gone into a state of readiness. CBS reported that the Trump administration was preparing for a possible new round of military strikes against Iran, although no final decision had been made at the time of reporting. The same reporting indicated that members of the military and intelligence sectors canceled plans for Memorial Day weekend, a measure seen in Washington as a sign of operational caution. Iran closed its airspace because it realized that American pressure had moved from rhetoric to an actual timetable. The weekend became a window of risk. Trump returned to Washington. Military advisors were put on alert, defense officials adjusted their schedules, and Republican senators began to increase public pressure for a tougher response. The chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker, called on Trump to abandon any weak deal and allow the armed forces to finish destroying Iran's military capabilities and reopen Hormuz. This pressure in Congress reinforces the central thesis. Iran is not closing its airspace as a routine measure. It is closing its airspace because it knows Trump is being pushed to make a decision. Within the Republican camp, there is a growing belief that any retreat would be sold by Tehran as a victory. For Trump's allies, the Iranian regime only understands cost, force, and consequence. That's why the president's stay in the White House carries political weight. He didn't stay in Washington just to follow a diplomatic note. He stayed because the crisis could turn into action. On the Iranian side, the calculation is also dangerous. But this strategy also reveals weakness. A confident government keeps its airspace open. A cornered government limits flights, mobilizes its defenses, threatens retaliation, and tries to turn fear into a political tool. Diplomatic mediation continues, but without real progress. The Guardian reported that Qatar sent mediators to Tehran amid talks about reopening Hormuz and nuclear negotiations. Meanwhile, the deadlock continues over control of the maritime passage, the stockpile of enriched uranium, and American demands. The problem for Iran is that Washington has already rejected the idea of allowing Tehran to treat an international route as the political property of the regime. The closure of the airspace also affects airlines, passengers, and international routes. Planes need to divert, spend more fuel, and avoid areas considered unstable. Reuters had already shown that the war with Iran caused air restrictions, route diversions, and increased costs for companies like Air India. When Iran closes its airspace, the impact isn't limited to Tehran. It spreads across flight corridors in Asia, the Gulf, and Europe. Trump knows that this economic and military pressure can turn into a political advantage. By canceling his trip to his son's wedding, he sends a direct message to allies, adversaries, and to Iran itself. The priority now is the security of the United States. The decision carries strong symbolism because it involves family, private matters, and public exposure. A president who gives up a personal event on the weekend shows that the White House is treating the case as a state emergency. The Iranian regime is trying to respond with intimidation. Media outlets linked to the Revolutionary Guard have once again threatened a harsh response if the United States resumes attacks. The threat targets not only American bases in the Middle East, but also the stability of US allies in the region. However, this rhetoric has its limits. The more Tehran threatens, the more it helps Trump argue that military pressure is not provocation, it's containment. Israel enters this scenario as a force that doesn't want to give Iran any time. While Tehran closes its airspace and Washington recalculates its next steps. Israel continues to treat Hezbollah, Iranian missiles, and supply routes as direct threats. This increases the weight of the American decision, because Trump is not just dealing with a diplomatic dispute. He is dealing with a whole web of allies, enemies, military bases, trade routes, and nuclear risk on the same chessboard. The most delicate point now is time. The Iranian airspace notice remains in effect until May 25th, but this deadline can be renewed if the regime believes the threat continues. In crises like this, the clock matters. Every hour of closed skies indicates that airlines, military forces, and governments are treating Iranian airspace as a risk area. And every hour of Trump in Washington shows that the White House doesn't want to be caught far from the command center. The world understands that the next report could come from Tehran, from Washington, or from some military radar in between. I'm Milson Alvis, an international relations specialist, and my purpose is to keep you well informed with the truth every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.